What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Welcome to the Just Gonna Say It podcast. It's Tuesday afternoon at 4 p.m. This is what we do every week. I hope you all are having a good week this week. We're pretty busy around here, just making a ton of pickups and stuff. Before we get into our conversation today, I just want everybody to know that these are ad-free podcasts. And so if you want to support the channel, we shut the ads off for the live streams. So you don't have to deal with those. If you want to support the channel, you are welcome to use a super chat to ask a question. You can go to DylanTalksTone and buy stuff. We got a bunch of really neat new stuff coming out. And also you can go to patreon.com/DylanTalksTone, support the channel that way, as well as the little join buttons down there. Since we don't have for YouTube membership, we not changed up. We added some stuff and kind of rearranged some stuff on Patreon. So I think you're going to dig that. Of course, you get a discount on all of the stuff we make at Dylan Talks Tone, and there's some other things going on over there. We just had a cool live hangout with our homies on Patreon last night, so that was super fun. And yeah, things are good. Welcome to the podcast. So today, I want to talk about things that can ruin a guitar company. And we're going to specifically talk about G&L because it's been in the news a bunch lately. And there's been a lot of speculation, et cetera, about what is going on. And for those of you that are new to the channel, you might not know this, but for those of you that have watched a bunch before, also I want to mention, do me a favor and hit the subscribe button. I know that like 65% of people that watch these videos, I just checked it just before we went live, 65.3% of these people that watch these videos aren't subscribed. So do me a favor and do that if you would. Okay, so for those of you that are not familiar, you probably don't know this, but for those of you that are and follow the channel regularly, you'll know that I have a little bird in the guitar industry that tells me stuff. And he is extremely reliable. I have, he knows everybody. And so I texted him this morning and I was like, yo, what's going on with G&L? And about an hour later, he called me and he said, well, you've probably seen all the stuff that's, obviously. And I was like, yeah, I saw Rhett Shull's video and he went on about tariffs. And then there were some other people. And he said, yeah, so basically last Wednesday, so they put, technically they put their employees on furlough, but since last Monday, there has not been anybody in the G&L building and it is basically closed. So G&L as we know it is more or less over. And there's noise that there's not noise. It's been for a long time. I believe, was it the McLaren family that run that thing? I think it's been in the back of their minds for a long time or the front of their minds for a long time that they really want Fender just to buy them. But I don't think Fender's interested. And so who knows what's going to happen with it? As of right now, there's nothing. There's nothing happening. So, yeah, this is a really interesting, it's a really interesting thing for a few reasons. And I want to talk about this because I talk about this a lot on the channel and I don't want to say people don't pay attention, but there's a lot of people that don't take me seriously when I talk about this. Super important stuff here. This is a bigger thing than just, G&L going out of business. It to me, it speaks to the state of, not the guitar industry as a whole. I was talking to him about that and I was like, how's business right now? Like, across the board. And he's like, well, it's down from what it was, kind of slow. But he says everybody's kind of reached, there's sort of like a lower plateau almost, and everybody's kind of chilling out and everything's cool and it's kind of clicking along. So it's not falling anymore. He said, so over the last few months, things have sort of leveled out. It's lower than it was last year. He's like, but honestly, to be honest with you, it's kind of to be expected after the huge boom that was all the COVID stuff. And then there's all this roller coaster after that. And it's sort of starting to level out. And and people are learning how much inventory they want to buy and all that kind of stuff, and things are sort of leveling out. And I bring up that because that's really important to this conversation. A lot of companies, during COVID, Fender got in big trouble with it, with their Squire line, where they just basically had too many built, and they got into a spot and had to lay off a bunch of people, and that sort of thing. This situation's a little different. There's a couple of things that are going on here that I was talking to him about it, and we were kind of chatting about it, kind of throwing ideas back and forth and stuff. And he knows stuff I don't know, so he's telling me various things. And first of all, I believe that the just as good as crowd and the just as good as mentality is part of what is killing GNL. Meaning that this guitar is just as good as a Fender. This guitar is better than a Fender. We've heard this. This guitar is more Fender than a Fender. No, it ain't. No, it ain't. It's not. This is, here's what GNL is. GNL is when Michael Jordan went to play baseball and then came back and played basketball. That's what this is. Okay. Honestly, it's more like Michael Jordan playing baseball than anything else. Yes, he's playing sports, but it's not the same. And it'll never be the same as it was before he left the Bulls the first time. That's what GNL is. It is not better than Fender. Okay. And there's a few reasons for this. And so we'll get into it and talk about it a little bit more. I watched the Rhett Shull video. He talked all about tariffs and stuff. Obviously, any company. So let me just say this. We don't need to get into whether they're right or wrong. Let's just look at the effects, because I don't want to talk about politics in that way, but just how it affects certain types of companies. Okay. So a company like mine, where we have a couple of products that come from China, magnets. It's a big one. It is a huge cost to pay a 30% tariff on something coming from China when you're ordering $2,000 of stuff worth of stuff at a time, right? Like it's a lot. But over the inventory stretch out, can you absorb it? Kind of, sort of. Yes, we're sort of figuring it out. And I think we'll be okay, right? When you have a company like GNL or any of these companies, this is going to be a problem. When you have any of these companies like GNL where they have an American custom shop, okay, that makes American guitars. It's a custom shop and then it's an American manufacturing spot. Okay, so they've got the American side. And then they've got the Asian side. Okay, they've got the import side. And their profit center, GNL's profit center, is the Asian side. I don't know what the exact numbers are, but when I floated these numbers to my buddy today, he was like, you're probably not far off. For every 100 Asian guitars they sell 10 or 15 American ones. I don't know that that's true. But just hypothetically, that is a realistic percentage. So for every 100, Asian guitars, they sell 15 American ones, and the Asian ones are more profitable, or at least they were, before all this stuff happened. And so now all of a sudden you have this jump in cost of goods, right? Because you have to pay this extra stuff. So if you can manage your way around that stuff, you're okay. Like there's a lot of companies that are able to do it. Some companies can't. If you were mismanaging your company beforehand, chances are, if you're driving a gold-plated Lamborghini and barely hanging on, and then all of a sudden this happens, you're going to be in trouble. What GNL was doing... Oh, hang on. We got a super chat. I'm going to explain to you what GNL was doing. Super chat from Dasherly Dave. Ad-free is for me. Thank you, Dave. I appreciate it. UPS has not gotten here with those bodies yet, but we're going to have a really interesting video coming out with that. Okay. So basically what GNL was doing is stupid. It's stupid. And I'm not saying they deserve to go out of business because I hate to see people lose their jobs, but this is dumb. Totally dumb. Basically what they were doing was, let's say so they know that they have to buy all these Asian guitars, right? Because that's what's really keeping them alive. They need to buy and import all these guitars. Okay. Well, where do you get the money for that? You got to get the money for that from somewhere. So what you could do is you could build a bunch of American guitars and sell them and use the profit from that, which isn't as much, but it'll get you, a big block of money. And then you can go buy a bunch of Asian guitars and really make your money on the Asian stuff. Okay. So you could do that, right? Okay. Makes sense. It's possible. You can do that. But what you could do also is you could have basically an internal pyramid scheme where you you keep building a pile of American guitars, even though they are not selling. You build up this huge inventory of American guitars. You've got them sitting in a warehouse, and then you borrow money against them to buy all the Asian ones. Then all of a sudden, tariffs come into place, bad money management comes into place, and all of a sudden you can't sell a bunch of American guitars. Those loans come due. You're out of money. Next thing you know, you got a bunch of guitars you can't sell, and you can't buy any more guitars, and you can't pay for the ones you have, and you're out of business. That's a bad deal. That's a bad deal. That is not a good business practice. Which is more or less what my little bird told me was going on there. And I have no reason to not believe him. I've seen this a couple of places in a couple of forums and Reddit threads and stuff. It's not an uncommon practice in any sort of manufacturing where you're stocking a lot of inventory. Car dealers do this, right? So what they'll do is they'll buy a bunch of cars because, like Ford, for example, they have to own the inventory. They don't actually like get them from most car dealers don't. They actually physically own the cars that are on the lot, right? But they'll floor those cars. They'll finance those cars until they sell them, right? And then that's why they, make better deals on ones that have been sitting there longer because they're going to start paying interest on them soon, that sort of thing. The problem is if you don't sell them, you're backwards. Well, if you do that too many times, you end up like G&L and you end up with all your workers on furlough and not coming back to work. I think there's a bigger problem here, though. I think there's a bigger problem than just bad money management, which is a big one. Poorly managed companies that's bad, man. And I hate to see it because all of a sudden, and I was seeing some posts, they were like, man, I saw some people saying they weren't getting paid for the last few weeks, or I don't know if it was the last few weeks or maybe 8 weeks, couple months. Supposedly they're going to get paid at the end of the month, today, I guess. Who knows? I hate to see that for those folks. I hope they can go somewhere else and land somewhere at a more responsible company and still stay in the business and build guitars and do cool things. I really hate to see that. But there's another problem with this. And it is the just as good as mentality. It's a problem. So here's why. When you have a guitar, okay, when you're building a brand, right? This goes with anything in business. When you're building a brand, especially something that you're building like a guitar or we'll just use guitars. You can have a product that is a commodity. Like a, like any kind of cheap guitar that you see on Amazon. And it doesn't really matter, right? Because it's just a thing. It's like toilet paper, okay? But if you're going to have a successful business and actually build it into a long living legacy like Fender did, like Leo Fender did, then there's going to be an entire story and history that goes with that, right? When you are successful at this, it's because you constantly have a story to tell. You give people reason to buy your products, right? Whether that be the history of it, the heritage of it, the quality of it, the quality and the heritage. I would argue that you would need to have both of those things to really be successful, especially now when people are really, they want to connect with what they're doing. Now, there are folks who don't care. There are folks that are like, whatever, a guitar is a guitar, and that's fine. It's like buying toilet paper, and it doesn't matter. We talked about this yesterday in our video, boutique stuff versus, big market stuff. So you can talk about, doing it both ways, right? But the problem is if you look at different brands, in fact, I was talking to my buddy about this today. If you look at different brands who came from Fender, okay? Because it's not just GNL. Now, GNL, they have the distinguishing factor of actually having Leo Fender involved with their company, like Music Man and GNL. Take, for example, somebody like Anderson, right? Or Sir. They both just make Strats, call it what it is. They just make Strats. They get as much money as they want for them. They sell out as many as they can make. And it's not hard to get them anymore, but it's harder to get than a GNL or a Fender, and they're more money. Why? Because when they left Fender, now at the beginning, they might have said, former Fender custom shop guy, maybe for a couple years, right? But once they built their name, they didn't ride that name anymore. You never see, if you go to Sir or, you don't see Fender all over their website. In fact, they would probably get in trouble for doing that, right? They're not riding on anybody else's name but their own at this point. Now, it's been not as long a time as GNL, right? And they have awesome brands that make awesome stuff that people really love, and they probably have no, I don't want to say no danger of going out of business, but by all appearances, they're selling kind of everything they can make and getting a lot of money for them, right? So they're doing what they do. They're making guitars and they're successful at it. Why? Because they made a name for themselves and then they leaned on their own name, their own reputation, even though they're still making Strats. They're fancy ones and they're things that they're proud of making, right? If you go to the GNL website right now, at the bottom of the page, it says, there's some fine print down there, and it says, we use Leo Fender's name all over the website because we're proud of it, and it's the only thing we can stand on, but blah, 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 lawyer stuff. We don't own actually the rights to his name, and blah, blah, blah. Leo doesn't actually have anything to do with us, but we use it all over our website anyway. I'm paraphrasing. I am not a lawyer, but that's what it says to me when I read it. So they have no storytelling. They have no brand identity outside of Leo Fender used to work here. That's all they have. Are the guitars good? Yeah, they're fine. But they're leaning on it too much. And when you have a brand behemoth with a marketing department and the creative department and all of the things surrounding it that Fender does, there's no way that a company that says, hey, Fender used to work here, it's not going to stand up. It's not going to stand up over time because this is a just as good as. Basically, GNL is saying, we're just as good as Fender. That might be true. They might make really nice guitars. I don't like them. I think they're dumb. I don't like the pickups. I don't like them. But that's just my personal, we all have opinions about guitars. I think the pickups are weird. I think that a lot of the things that Leo Fender did, this is my take on it. Again, I'm not a lawyer, but I know that there are, because I do know this, there are certain pickup designs that were done as a result of legal situations. So saying, well, you can't make this because we make this, therefore you have to do something a little different. Now, I don't know if that was the result the goofy pickups in G&L stuff is the result of that. I'm not sure. Okay. But back then, all of those patents and stuff were still alive. So there's a lot of reason to believe this is my opinion, and I've not done this research, so I'm literally talking out of the side of my head. I could totally be wrong. But my guess is the reason a lot of this stuff was so weird is because they couldn't copy stuff yet because it was too close, back in 1980 or something, whenever they started all this. So this stuff's just weird for the sake of being weird. It's not better. It's cool. Yeah, sure. It's cool if you're into it. I'm not. But it's just weird for the sake of being weird. And the guitars are nice. Okay, they're nice. But if I want a Fender, I'm going to get a Fender. If I want to be associated with Leo Fender, I'm going to buy a Fender. I'm not going to buy a G&L, right? And as much as the G&L fanboys want to say that they're better than a Fender, they aren't. And the reason they aren't is because there's no real connection with what a Fender is beyond a made-up thing that Leo Fender used to work there. And a lot of people will say, well, he was an engineer and he was a genius and blah, blah. No, he wasn't. He was an accountant. And what Leo Fender was good at doing was taking a guitar and making it out of a bunch of pieces. This is what Leo Fender was good at, okay? And I know this after being in the pickup business for over a decade now. Leo Fender could make the most amount of guitars with the least amount of parts. That's what he was good at. End of story. So he could take this neck, this neck, this neck, and put it on 5 different guitars. He could take this pickup magnet, and this pickup magnet, or maybe this one pickup magnet and put it in 6 different pickups. He could take this material that they make pickups out of and put it in all the guitars and not have to re-engineer something new. He could take old house wiring and put it in all the guitars and it would be fine, which is what the cloth wire was. All that stuff. It was basically like, wait a minute, how can we do this? We can make the most amount of models of guitars with the least amount of parts with the most amount of crossover of parts possible. That's what he was good at. He was really good at it. Really good at it. And it's what made Fender awesome. Weird pickups, weird tremolos, and a thing that sort of looks like a Fender but isn't a Fender isn't what he did. He created the way we build guitars. He created the process more than the instrument itself. Along the way, made a legendary instrument, but G&L was not that instrument. Music Man and Ernie Ball, that's an interesting story because those guitars are truly unique and different. They don't have Strat copies over there in the same sense. Now, calm down. There are some, but not in the same sense. They've really gone off and used different materials, and you think about basswood and funky peghead with the 2 on the wrong side, and they've done all kind of weird stuff, like different, and they've gone on to continue to evolve, not continue to just make the copies of the same old guitars and try to do the same thing Fender does, which is like, hey, it's 2025. Here's the bold new graphics. This is a new sunburst we didn't have before. Oh, this is a pick guard that we put on this color on this guitar that we didn't have before, the same way Fender does. And it's just not the same because it's just not the same. Let's see. We got a super chat from Tazzy Tim. Sorry, I missed that. Just going on ranting about this. Good day, Toners. I finally made it. Awesome. Thank you, sir. Thank you for the super chat. Yeah. So that's really, to me, they have no story to tell. They have a business model with no financial backbone. They have a copy guitar that everybody says is just as good as, but when it really comes down to it, people are going to buy a Fender. Especially new players. I think one of the things that people forget is the enthusiast. There's the enthusiast guy, okay? He probably drives a Saab or something. Like those guys, like people that drive Saabs, people that drive Land Rovers. I used to drive Land Rovers. You're an enthusiast about that thing, and that's why you drive it, right? It's not actually better. Well, Land Rover's pretty rad, but they break a lot, and you kind of have to know what's going on with them, and you know that oil leak's not that big a deal because you've spent a bunch of time in the forums, and you know what I mean. Like I'm a Land Rover guy. I was, And that's kind of how they are, right? So you kind of have to be an enthusiast about this weird brand. Right? But a new person that's new to having a 4-wheel drive or having something they're going to take in the woods once in a while is going to buy a Toyota 4Runner, right? Or whatever. You know what I mean? They're going to buy the widely known, everybody knows it, super reliable, don't have to worry about it thing. They're going to buy the Toyota 4Runner. The weirdo, like me, is going to buy the Land Rover, but he knows that he's going to have to clean off his driveway sometimes, and he knows that he's going to have to change head gaskets every 50,000 miles. And you know what I mean? He knows that stuff. So it's the same thing with the GNL. The weirdos that like GNLs, and I'm using the term weirdo very affectionately in this case because, you know, people think they're neat guitars, so they're neat guitars to them. So they like that stuff. But the 17-year-old, the 18-year-old, the 20-year-old, the 40-year-old who's not played guitar much isn't going to buy a GNL. They're not going to buy that. They're going to buy a Fender. They're going to buy a Squier. It's just kind of the way it is. Because they're not weird. And they can identify with them more. Really, you know? Let's see. I'm going to go back through some of these comments and see what we're saying here. Hey, from New Zealand. What's up, yo? Let's see. Maybe I went too far. This is a great question. I've wondered it. Everyone's quick to blame this on the tariffs. Is it really a race to the bottom that's going to kill? I believe it is. I really believe it is. I think if you like, how cheap are you trying to get? Do you want to build something good? Do you want to have something good? Or are you just trying to be cheap? It's a question. It's a real question. Hang on. I'm just going down through here. Canada Post Office is on strike again. I heard that. GNL's Asian guitars are almost out of stock at Sweetwater. I'm thinking there is a big order hung up in customs waiting for tariffs that they never planned for to be paid, or there are no guitars. So here's the way these foreign plants work. So for example, in Asia, like in China and Indonesia, like Fender, for example, will put a PO in a year out, because I think we talked about this before, but those third-party vendors who are building these guitars, they're not Fender, they're not GNL, they're just some factory somewhere. And, in Asia, and they're like, we need to keep our lines rolling, and whoever will fill that slot is who's going to fill that slot. If you can't afford to pay for what we had built, or you can't afford to order X amount of more guitars for the next 12 months, you lose that slot, and you probably will never get it back again because somebody will come in and fill that slot. So that means that a company like Fender is forced to buy a certain amount of inventory from Squier, from the factory that builds Squiers. And so is GNL, and so is everybody else who, buys their stuff in China and Indonesia. So yes, there's one of two things happen. One is they ran out of guitars because they couldn't afford the slot to build the guitars this year when they should have ordered them last year. Or what you said, a bunch of stuff is locked up in customs and they can't pay it. I would say that either one of those things is true. Or some substance thereof. Of course, there's so much, stuff we don't know, and there's so much red tape and stuff goes on with all this. So you can't, speak in absolutes here, but, obviously a lot of speculation, but I do know, know some stuff. Let's see. Some people talking about how they like them. I was looking at purchasing a Tribute the other day, and it was out of stock. Yep. That's kind of why I'm not into the Yamaha Revstar. Yeah, I'm with you. That's I talk about this all the time, and people are like, "You're such a snob," and I'm like, "Okay, sure," but it's like I don't know, anything that you buy that is just has no meaning doesn't make sense to me. If you're going to be an artist with this thing, why would you buy something that doesn't mean anything to you? I don't know. That's just a thing that I can't get my head around. Let's see. There's more legend, in fact, than in guitar companies. It's true. GNL had a lot of differentiation from Fender. Pickup and bridge designs were Leo's attempt at trying to improve his existing designs. He was an inventor, and GNL was his retirement hobby. Well, here that's a bad business plan. That's a bad business plan, and obviously we can tell that it's true. The pickups are unique. Yeah, they're cool. They're weird. How are they for modding? Kind of stupid because the pick guards are, like you can't. I suppose you could pull the pick guard off and do some other stuff with them, but you'd have to fiddle a lot. Some of the tellies are probably easier to deal with, but or whatever they call them, Blues Boy or whatever. Yeah, people want to look down and see a Fender. It's true. Just based on who they know played the stuff. You're right, I've never really paid attention to what an artist uses. Is that a thing that actually drives sales? Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Win on Monday, win on Sunday, sell on Monday. It, is not just on the racetrack in the 60s in NASCAR. That's a real thing. I was actually thinking about that this weekend. I was watching MotoGP, and Marc Marquez won the championship with 5 races left. He's on a Ducati. Ducati sales are going to spike because it's just how it works, right? And the same thing with guitar stuff. It might not even be a, people say, well, I'm not a signature guy or whatever. I am. I got tons of them. It might not be that you're going to go buy a signature Slash, or you're going to go buy a signature Clapton, or a signature Eric Clapton, or Eric Johnson, or, anything like that, Yngwie. But especially for folks who are not experienced, we have to think about the large percentage. So here's something that we need to think about. As many people as we have here, we have 100,000 people subscribed to this channel. This is a small microcosm. The real guitar enthusiasts who care about this stuff and who argue about tone wood and crap are a very, 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 very small percentage of the overall amount of people that play guitar. The majority of people that play guitar are just people who want a guitar. They don't care about capacitor values. They don't care about capacitor tolerances. They don't care about any of it. They just want a guitar. Hey, it's blue. Hey, I saw my favorite rock star on the Grammys last night. Yes, the Grammys, playing that shaped guitar, that whatever that is. And they go and buy that. And they find out it's a Fender, and they find out how much Fenders cost. Holy crap, Fenders are $1,500. Oh, Fender makes this thing and it's kind of the same thing. And they just buy that. It's an association thing. Or maybe it's, maybe it's your dad, or, maybe it's, I play guitar because my dad played guitar, and that's how I got started. So, you're going to go with what is familiar to you, and you're going to go with what you associate as being cool. So I think that's really it. Yeah, there's just too many great guitars in the world these days. It's an embarrassment of riches. Now, I think it's cool because I think it gives everybody a flavor to choose. You can kind of choose what you want. I just wish, I think it's my personal wish that people would choose to invest in themselves. If you're going to play a musical instrument, first of all, realize that it's not a tuba. Okay. It's not a trumpet. It's not a piano. It's not a drum set. You know, you don't have to pay $8,000 for an instrument. You know, you can get a really good one for $2,000, which in 2025 is a reasonable number for an excellent guitar. I wish people would invest that in themselves more than participate in the race to the bottom, because I think it's going to be the demise of more companies if people choose the cheapest alternative race to the bottom, because the race to the bottom is the bottom. And if the bottom wins, the company is gone. And that's sad. And guess what? If all of these companies that make all this cheap stuff go out of business, guess what you're stuck with? The stuff you should have bought in the first place. The stuff that was the only thing available in 1975, 1978, 1979, until, you know, all these other sub brands started popping up, right? There was a time when all you could get was a Strat, a Tele, a Les Paul, a 335, an SG, a V, an Explorer, right? Like, you know, there was like 20 guitars on the market. And not really, but you know what I mean. And there was no Squire. There was no Mexico. There was no any of that. None of that stuff. There was no Asian versions of, there was no SE. There was no anything. There was just the thing, and you bought it. And it cost just as much as it does now. I don't know. I just think that if we could get back to that, it would be simpler. I wish Fender didn't have like 35 different models of Stratocasters. That would be cool. I wish Gibson, not because we want to limit choice, but because we want to limit confusion in the marketplace. I think people are, what I see from my side of it is people that get frustrated. I just had an email last night. Somebody's like, I don't know what to do, man. I got this guitar and I'm thinking about buying this other one, and I just don't know what to do because there's just too many choices, like was mentioned earlier. And I just feel like I wish it was like, dude, Tele or Strat. And what I tell people is, well, this is what I always tell people: whatever you can afford, get the best one you can afford from a company with an actual name on it, right? One that's not going to disappear in 2 seconds. One from an actual name on it, and like if you want a Telecaster, how much do you got? How much can you afford? And let's say, how much could you save up in the next 90 days? Because can that push you a little bit further, right? Okay. So let's say you're like, right now I can afford $800, but if I wait 90 days or, 3-4 months, then I'd be able to afford 15. Okay. Then what I would do is I would say, get up to that American Performer level, whatever that level is right in that $1,500, $1,800 range, right in there. 1,600, I think. And then just pick the color and pick the bridge type that you want. And it'll be a good guitar. There's not one better or worse than the other. Of course, do you want 50s style bridge and stuff, and 60s style bridge, or do you want a modern bridge, or do you want a rosewood fretboard, or do you want a maple fretboard? Do you want it to be sparkly? Do you want it to be pastel color? Do you want it to be road worn? Whatever. Doesn't matter. Get up to like the tier that you think you can afford, the best tier of guitar, like price point wise that you can afford, and then just pick a color. It doesn't really matter at that point. And I just wish that it would be easier than that, because a lot of folks don't really understand it. I choose a Fender because it looked like something I wouldn't destroy being clumsy. Yeah, for sure. I would also assume that the vast majority of people with excess money to splurge on gear want stuff that they wanted as kids, and it was Fender and Gibson and maybe a George Harrison Gretsch. That doesn't That's not money dependent. That has nothing to do with money. That has to do with what do you dream of, right? They will all be made by Court. You know what's funny? I was actually having a Court conversation with my friend today when we were talking about all this stuff. And he said, man, this one time, he's like, because he used to work vendor, and he says, there's this one meeting that we used to have every year, and it was with the Court people, and it was with the Court and Fender people. And he said, we'd go to this, everybody go out to dinner, and of course you have a couple of drinks in you. And he said they would start arguing about who made who, right? Like, did Fender make Court better because Fender taught them how to run at a much higher volume, which is absolutely true? Or did Court make Fender better by giving them a place to be able to make such volume, right? It's chicken versus the egg sort of thing. Because it's really true. They kind of made each other in that budget guitar area. Other brands being built by Court, except for Court's own stuff, kind of came later. But really, it was a Fender thing. It's really funny. It's just a funny thing to talk about. What's the best solution for intonation on 3-barrel compensated telly? Follow one of my videos and set it up. You'll be fine. You can do it. No big deal. Mine is perfect. I'll give you a couple hints though. Run your neck relief as flat as possible, as you can. Run your action as low as you can. 2 different measurements there. And then when you set your intonation, you'll be pulling on the guitar a lot less, and it will stay in tune a lot better. And you'll have to pull the guitar not as far from pitch when you push on the string. So lower action, flatter relief will get you a better result. But that kind of is across the board anyway, but that'll get you a better result. You can get offset 3-barrel saddles. They're not necessary if you... Oh, the other thing is 3-barrel saddles are meant for a fairly conventional... So if you're putting 9 to 42s or 10 to 46s on it, you'll probably be fine. If you start running 9 to 52s, you start running weird combinations of string gauges, then you'll start to have more problems, because the adjustment of intonation between strings is to compensate for the difference in the gauge of the string. So when we talk about compensating, right? Basically what we're on a guitar like that, what we're doing is a telly is 25.5-inch scale. And then all those other little not microscopic, but those, few thousandths of an inch measurements are literally to keep the guitar principally at a 25.5-inch scale, but compensating for, that's where the word comes from for this, compensating for the difference in the thicknesses of the strings as you go up. So if you use really wacky, like let's say you put baritone strings on it, or let's say you put, some really heavy or really super light strings, then it's possible. Or you start running custom gauges where you've got, I don't know, like a 10 and then maybe a 17 and I don't know, like the steps between the strings need to be fairly consistent for it to all work. So if you start using really wacky string gauges, you'll have trouble. Let's see. I'm using large strings, 11. Oh, okay. Yeah, 11s will probably work as long as you use a conventional set, and the proportions are right in between them. Yeah, you should be totally fine, and you can do it. It'll set up. If it doesn't, something's too high. If you have a Telecaster, and that's what I always tell everybody, if you have a Telecaster that doesn't set up perfectly, it's your nut is too high, or your action is too high, or you have too much neck relief. I have told people forever. Well, I've not told people forever. I've known Matt Flaherty at Texas Toast Guitars for 6 years. 5-6 years. And he's the one that turned me on to, I never did this before him. So 5 or 6 years now, I've been setting all of my guitars completely dead flat. the neck relief. And everybody thinks I'm stupid for doing that. And I know that they think Matt's dumb for doing it too. But guess what? Paul Reed Smith just did that video about neck relief. And he said dead flat to what? 04 or 06 or something, like ridiculously flat. If it's not totally flat, it's almost flat. And actually I have 2 PRSs and that's about where they were. That's about where they are. So you can do it. So just set it as flat as possible and set it as low as possible on your nut and your string height, and you'll have way less issues. Yeah, man. Good question, though. Let's see. Just trying to see if there's any other things in here. Best solution for destination. I'm just making sure we didn't miss any. I'm trying to make sure I just didn't miss any big questions here that we. Yeah. Anyway, well, thanks for coming and hanging out, having this conversation to get today. This was really good. Obviously, buy the best guitar you can afford. Chances are, if you want a Chinese GNL, you'll be able to get one real cheap. So that might be a thing if you're into it. I'm not, but that's pretty cool if that's a thing for you. And yeah, that's really all I got today. Thanks for hanging out. Make sure you like and subscribe. Go to DylanTalksTone, buy some pickups. Do all the things. And do you like Lawler or Fralin pickups better for a Tele or anything else? Well, we make pickups and they're awesome. So go to DylanTalksTone and check them out. If I was going to pick between those two, I'd go Lawler. But I pick my stuff over their stuff. But for Tele stuff. But Lawler makes fantastic stuff. Yep. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you in the next video.